Lieutenant Maya Torres knew she didn't belong here the moment she stepped into the Galactic Combat Academy's main training hall. The structure stretched upward for 3 stories, its walls lined with weapons from 40 different species' martial traditions. She counted at least a dozen instruments designed specifically to kill things her homeworld had never evolved to face. She also counted 16 pairs of eyes, some compound, some thermal imaging, one disturbingly omnidirectional, all fixed on her with varying degrees of amusement. The Vrexian instructor's exoskeleton bore acid-etched tallies marking 8 victories in single combat. His mandibles clicked as he surveyed the assembled class. "You will address me as Battlemaster Corin," he announced, his voice resonating through translation implants. "This course is Advanced Tactical Response. Today we determine if you survive the practical application." A Hethan to Maya's left, all 4 crystalline arms and blade-sharp bone structure leaned toward its neighbor. "Why is the mammal here? Shouldn't she be in xenobiology as a specimen?" "Diplomatic inclusion initiative," someone else muttered. "Command's way of proving humans aren't just good for labor negotiations and dying poetically." Maya kept her eyes forward. She'd heard worse in the academy cantina, where students openly wagered on how long she'd last before requesting transfer back to human-only facilities. The over-under currently sat at 3 weeks. Corin's segmented head swiveled toward her. "The human will observe the first rotation. Remedial fundamentals before we risk an interstellar incident." "Sir, I qualified in, you qualified in human. Combat systems," Corin interrupted, his voice carrying that particular condescension reserved for explaining obvious facts to the deliberately stupid, which are, charitably, 2,000 years behind current doctrine. "You will watch. You will learn. You may survive long enough to embarrass yourself properly." The Hethan's laugh sounded like wind chimes in a hurricane. Maya's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Understood, Battlemaster." The first matches were brutal and educational. A Korvath, think wolf-like predator with 6 legs and an honor code that stopped just short of useful faced-off against. A Shrathi, whose scales could deflect bladed weapons. They moved through recognized patterns: strike, parry, counter, disengage. Beautiful, choreographed, predictable. Maya watched the Korvath lose because he telegraphed an overhead strike half a second before executing it. Watched the Shrathi win because the curriculum apparently said she would. "Textbook execution," Corin announced, helping the Korvath to his feet. "Note the adherence to form even under pressure. This is how warriors survive." Maya noted that the Korvath had 3 clear opportunities to win by abandoning form. She kept that observation to herself. By the 4th match, she understood the problem. Everyone here had been trained in Galactic Standard Combat Doctrine, a synthesized system designed for maximum applicability across species. It was elegant, efficient, and it assumed your opponent had also read the manual. "Lieutenant Torres." Corin's mandibles spread wide in what might have been anticipation. "You've been admirably silent. Perhaps you'd like to demonstrate your Earth's martial prowess?" The way he said Earth suggested a place where people hit each other with rocks and called it strategy. "I'd be honored, Battlemaster." "Excellent." Corin selected 2 training staves from the equipment rack, solid composite designed to hurt without killing. "Since you lack any natural advantages, we'll keep this simple. Defend yourself for 30 seconds without yielding. Consider it a passing grade." The class formed a loose circle. Someone started a betting pool. Maya heard the odds. 8 to 1 she'd last 15 seconds. 10 to 1 she'd cry. 50 to 1 she'd land a hit. She took the offered staff, tested its weight. Decent balance. Probably wouldn't break under normal use. Corin settled into a ready stance, 4th form center guard, exactly as the manual specified. "Begin." Maya struck first a probing jab at his primary knee joint. He deflected easily, mandibles clicking disappointment. Predictable. Humans always attack. She'd already committed to a high feint and low reverse, not because it would work, but because she needed to see his reaction speed. Fast, not impossibly fast, but fast enough that the training staff hummed through air. Corin's counter came exactly as doctrine specified. Deflect, rotate, riposte to center mass. Maya blocked. The training staff snapped clean in half. For a moment, nobody moved. Maya stood there holding 2 feet of composite polymer. Corin held his attacking position, probably calculating how to make this less humiliating for everyone involved. The Heffin started laughing first. The weapon surrendered before she did. Maya looked at the splintered staff, then at the longer, sharper piece in her right hand. She shifted her grip, holding it reverse style like a dagger, and raised the shorter piece in her left as a guard. "Continue, Battlemaster." The laughter stopped. Corin's thermal pits narrowed. "You're not seriously. You said defend myself. You didn't specify with what." Somewhere in the back, someone whispered, "Is she allowed to do that?" Corin's mandibles locked into what Maya now recognized as genuine annoyance. "There's no technique for broken equipment," Maya smiled. It was not a comforting expression. "I know." Corin moved like a textbook, come to life, economical, precise, each motion flowing into the next with mechanical grace. Third form transitioned to 7th, then a flawless execution of the Rexian Cascade, a combination specifically designed to overwhelm hesitant opponents. Maya wasn't hesitating. She was circling, keeping the broken chair leg, because that's what it looked like now. All jagged edges and improvised grip, low and mobile. Her footwork didn't match any recognized pattern. She moved like water finding a path, never committing, never settling. "She's terrified," the Korvath muttered. "Look at that stance. No foundation. And why hasn't she been hit yet?" The Shrathi's tail twitched thoughtfully. Corin pressed forward, increasing tempo. The Battlemaster advanced page 47 in every combat manual from here to the outer reaches. Maya gave ground, but not in straight lines. Angles, curves, forcing him to adjust his approach every third step. "Your movement is erratic," Corin said, his voice steady despite exertion. "There's no center to your defense. Making it hard to predict where the center seems useful, though." The Heffin's 4 arms crossed simultaneously. "That's not how combat works. You establish dominant position." Maya threw the smaller piece. Not at Corin, at the ground, directly in his forward path. He tracked it instinctively, thermal pits following the motion. And in that half-second of divided attention, she was inside his guard with the jagged edge aimed at the joint between his chest plates. He blocked instinctively, but had to abandon optimal positioning to do it. "Cheap tricks," someone called out. "That is dead," someone else countered. "Cheap just means cost-effective." Corin recalibrated, switching to defensive posture. The Imperial wall unbreakable according to doctrine. It assumed the opponent would exhaust themselves attacking fortified positions. Maya picked up the thrown piece and resumed circling. A Corval observer built like an ambulatory tank with philosophical pretensions spoke up from the sidelines. "Battlemaster, she's not engaging. Shouldn't this be scored as failure to commit?" The exercise parameters were to defend herself, Corin said, though his mandibles suggested he was reconsidering the technicality. "She hasn't yielded. She hasn't done anything." Maya smiled at that. "I've learned the Battlemaster favors his left side for power strikes, overcommits on vertical attacks, and assumes everyone fights at his tempo. That's 3 things. The training." Hall went quiet except for the hum of environmental systems. "You've been analyzing," the Shrathi said slowly. "While fighting. We call it learning on the job." Corin's thermal pits flared. "Combat isn't an educational seminar. You execute training, or you die confused. Earth has this saying about plans and first contact with the enemy." Maya shifted her weight, and for the first time it looked like she was preparing to attack rather than survive. Something about them not surviving the meeting. Your species builds doctrine around failure. The Corval sounded genuinely confused. We build it around adaptation. Corin lunged, a beautiful execution of the striker's commitment, designed to end bouts decisively. All his weight, all his momentum, perfectly aligned for maximum impact. Maya dropped. Not a dodge, not a defensive maneuver from any recognized system. She simply let gravity do the work, and Corin's strike passed through empty air where her torso had been. His momentum carried him forward. She was already rolling, coming up behind him, the jagged chair leg pressed against the soft joint between his carapace sections. How? Corin froze. That move sacrifices all defensive positioning. If I'd adjusted, you'd have exposed. But you didn't adjust. You committed. Maya didn't move the improvised weapon, because the manual says striker's commitment is unblockable. So you trust it completely. The Heffin was no longer laughing. She gambled on reading his intent. No. The Shrathi's eyes, all 6 of them, were fixed on Maya with new intensity. She gambled that he wouldn't read hers. There's a difference. Corin's voice came out carefully measured. You could have been killed by that exchange. Could have wasn't. Maya pressed slightly harder, enough to make her point without causing actual damage. Could have is just the universe offering options. You're fighting incorrectly. No, Battlemaster. Maya stepped back, lowering the broken staff. You're predicting incorrectly. You keep assuming I'll respond the way your training says I should. But I wasn't trained to fight Vrexians. She set the improvised weapon down. I was trained to fight anything with whatever I had. You spend years perfecting technique. I spent years learning that perfect technique doesn't matter if the other guy brought a rock. Corin turned slowly, reassessing. His mandibles clicked in a new pattern, not amusement, not threat. Calculation. The exercise specified 30 seconds. It's been 45. His thermal pits swept across the class. I noticed several of you stopped breathing somewhere around the 22nd mark. He turned back to Maya. Your methodology will be studied. Command has already transmitted 3 requests for documentation. What documentation? Precisely their concern. The class dismissed, but students lingered, watching Maya like she was a chemical reaction that probably shouldn't be possible. The Shrathi who defended her analytical approach caught up with her in the corridor. Question, she said without preamble. The staff breaking. You genuinely didn't know it would? Genuinely. But you planned for it. I planned for something breaking. Equipment, strategy, my own structural integrity. Specifics are just details. Maya adjusted her datapad. You ever hunt something that's also hunting you? No rules, no referees, just you and something with teeth that thinks you're dinner? That's not combat. That's survival scenarios. Different curriculum entirely. On Earth, Maya said quietly, they're the same class. The Shrathi fell silent for 3 full seconds. Your entire species is taking the survival exam every day. Open book, but the questions keep changing. Word spread through the academy like radiation through shielding. By the next rotation cycle, Maya had become the facility's most popular spectator sport. Students who'd never shown interest in human anything suddenly materialized. Whenever she entered training spaces. Then came the official academy response. Introduction to Human Tactical Methodology. Optional. Elective. Maximum enrollment. 20 students. They needed a title that sounded properly academic. Maya suggested winning ugly. Command countered with adaptive combat under adverse conditions. The compromise landed on non-standard engagement protocols, which satisfied nobody but offended no one. The hallmark of institutional decision-making. Across galaxies. The first class sold out in 47 seconds. The second class had a waiting list of 300. By the third cycle. Command was quietly discussing whether to make it mandatory. Maya stood in the empty training hall the night before the first session, holding the broken chair leg she'd kept. Not as a trophy. Trophies implied victory over something specific. This was a reminder that work was temporary. Corin found her there, reviewing holographic training scenarios with an expression suggesting none of them were quite right. "Nervous?" he asked, terrified. Maya gestured at the scenarios. "I have to teach people how to abandon everything they trust. These are all designed with defined parameters, win conditions, acceptable losses, measurable outcomes. And your concern is? Earth doesn't work that way. We don't get parameters. We get situations that are already on fire with incomplete information, facing opponents who don't care about our tactical preferences." She dismissed the hologram. "How do I teach someone to be comfortable being uncomfortable?" Corin's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Perhaps start with why the staff broke. It was defective. It was operated outside design specifications. You used it harder than it was built to endure because you assumed it might fail and decided to extract maximum utility before that happened." He gestured around the pristine training hall. "Everything here is built to survive proper use. Your species assumes nothing survives, so you use it improperly on purpose." Maya smiled slowly. "We don't trust our equipment to love us back." "That's the third time you've said that." "Is it doctrine?" "It's Tuesday, Battlemaster." "That doesn't—" He stopped. "You're saying this is baseline thinking, not advanced strategy. Every human over the age of 10 knows that important things break at critical moments. We build our entire civilization around redundancy, improvisation, and backup plans for our backup plans." She turned the broken composite over in her hands. "You know what humans call Murphy's Law?" "You mentioned it. If something can go wrong, we also have the corollary." Murphy was an optimist. Corin was silent for a long moment. "Your species expects failure. We expect opportunity. Failure is just the universe providing options we hadn't considered yet. That's insane. That's adaptable." Maya set down the broken chair leg on the equipment rack, where it looked deeply out of place among pristine training weapons. "Besides, you call it barbarism. We call it still being here. After how many extinction events?" 5 confirmed. 7, if you count the ones we caused ourselves. We're not sure about 3 others. Records get spotty during apocalypses. Corin's thermal pits thinned slightly, and you just continued, with whatever was handy. The Battlemaster looked at the broken composite, then at Maya, then back at the composite. "The galaxy thinks in terms of supposed to," he said slowly. "Earth thinks in terms of what if and close enough. And occasionally, hold my beverage while I try something stupid. That last one doesn't translate either. Most human things don't, sir. We're working on it." The Academy's observation deck overlooked the training hall through one-way transparency. 3 officials reviewed footage of Maya's improvised victory for the 4th time, their collective silence more telling than any analysis. Commander Thelver, a Corval with 17 years overseeing tactical education, finally spoke. "Replay this sequence at marker 415. The hologram shimmered, reconstructing the moment Maya had dropped beneath Corin's finishing strike. She initiated that maneuver before he committed to the attack vector. Thelver observed, his secondary eyes narrowing. "Predictive modeling," offered Instructor Izeth, her shrathy tail coiling. "Standard combat intuition, no." The third observer, a Hethan strategist named Qual, gestured with 2 arms, while the other 2 manipulated hologram controls. "Predictive modeling requires data extrapolation. She's operating on assumption architecture. Watch her positioning throughout the entire engagement. She's not countering his technique. She's countering his training." Qual isolated 3 separate exchanges, displaying them simultaneously. "She's fighting the manual, not the person." That shouldn't work, Delver said flatly. It works against anyone who trusts their training more than their opponent's capacity for irrationality. Down in the training hall, the first non-standard engagement protocol session was about to begin. 20 elite students, the best tactical minds from 14 species, sat in formation. Waiting. Maya entered carrying the broken chair leg. "Good morning," she said, setting it on the demonstration platform. "Before we start, I need to know, how many of you have ever lost a fight?" Silence. A few confused glances. Let me rephrase. How many of you have been in a fight where the outcome was genuinely uncertain? Where you didn't know if you'd win? More silence. Then, slowly, a Korvath in the back raised one paw. "Once. Training accident." "Equipment malfunction caused." "Not a training accident," Maya interrupted gently. "A real fight. Life or death. No referees, no safety protocols, no rules except survival. No hands." Maya picked up the broken composite. "Then we have a problem. Everything you've learned assumes fighting is a structured event with defined parameters. But here's what Earth learned over 10,000 years of continuous warfare. Real fights don't have parameters. They have chaos with teeth." She held up the jagged weapon. "This broke during my match with Battlemaster Korin. Equipment failure, right? Defective materials, poor quality control. Except that's not what happened. This broke because I used it wrong on purpose, because I assumed it would fail eventually and wanted to control when and how." A Shrathi student raised a questioning appendage. "You intentionally damaged your own weapon?" "I intentionally used my weapon beyond its design specifications because the alternative was trusting it completely. And the moment it broke, everyone here thought I'd lost." Maya smiled. "But I'd already planned what to do when it failed." "Hadn't planned for it to fail, just planned for when it did." "That's paranoia," the Corval observed. "That's aggressive pessimism." "There's a difference." 3 weeks into the course, Command convened an emergency review board. The trigger was a training exercise that had gone sideways in ways the safety protocols hadn't anticipated. A Hethan student named Vren had been matched against a Vrexian in standard sparring. Midway through, Vren's primary weapon malfunctioned, a genuine equipment failure this time. Instead of yielding or requesting replacement equipment as doctrine required, Vren had improvised. She'd used her own chitinous arm plating as a shield, her opponent's momentum against him, and a piece of broken flooring tile as a striking implement. She'd won decisively, and she terrified every instructor who'd witnessed it. "This is what we were afraid of," Telver said, his voice grave as he addressed the review board. "Torres isn't teaching combat methodology. She's teaching controlled chaos. She's teaching adaptation," Koren countered. He'd been sitting in on Maya's classes as both observer and occasional demonstration partner. "There's a distinction." "Is there?" Admiral Kess, a silver-scaled Shrathi who commanded the academy, leaned forward. "Student Vren could have been seriously injured. She abandoned every safety protocol we've established. She won. That's not the point." "Respectfully, Admiral, that's exactly the point." Korin's thermal pit swept across the assembled board. "For 800 years, we've refined combat into an elegant system. We've eliminated variables, standardized responses, created predictable outcomes. And in doing so, we've created a vulnerability." He activated a holographic display showing Maya's original match. "Watch this sequence. Torres doesn't respond to what I'm doing. She responds to what my training requires me to do next. She's not fighting me. She's fighting the fact that I'm predictable." "All combat requires predictability," Thelver argued. "That's how tactical doctrine functions. Pattern recognition, response optimization. Against opponents who share our doctrine. Yes." Korin paused the hologram at the moment Maya dropped beneath his strike. But what happens when we encounter a species that doesn't? The frontier conflicts have already demonstrated that theoretical combat superiority means nothing against opponents who refuse to engage on our terms. The room fell quiet. Everyone remembered the frontier conflicts, 3 years of inconclusive engagements against species that fought in ways galactic standard combat doctrine couldn't adequately counter. You're suggesting we abandon centuries of refined methodology, Admiral Cass said slowly, because one human got lucky with a broken chair. I'm suggesting, Korin replied carefully, that Torres didn't get lucky. She created a situation where luck became irrelevant by planning for every possible failure state simultaneously. And more importantly, she's teaching others to do the same. Maya was called before the board that evening. She entered the chamber to find 20 senior officers, arranged in judgment formation, a semicircle, designed to create psychological pressure on the person. Standing at its focus, she'd read about this configuration in human military history, courts-martial, inquisitions, show, trials. She stood at attention and waited. Admiral Cass spoke first. Lieutenant Torres, this board has reviewed your teaching methodology and its results. We have concerns. Understood, Admiral. Your students are abandoning established safety protocols, improvising with damaged equipment, and engaging in what can only be described as reckless tactical choices. The Admiral's scales rippled. Student Vren's recent match could have resulted in serious injury, but it didn't, Admiral. She assessed the risks, adapted to circumstances, and achieved victory against a superior opponent using resources available in the moment. She used a broken floor tile as a weapon. Yes, Admiral. She did. Maya kept her voice level. And in doing so, she demonstrated something this academy has apparently forgotten. That warriors don't get to choose their circumstances. They get to choose their response. Delver's crest flattened in clear disapproval. That philosophy encouraged chaos. That philosophy acknowledges chaos. There's a difference. Maya looked around the semicircle of senior officers. With respect, sirs, when was the last time any of you fought in a situation that deviated from expected parameters? When was the last time you had to make a tactical decision with incomplete information, failing equipment, and an opponent who didn't follow your doctrine? Silence. The frontier conflicts, Admiral Cass said quietly. Exactly. And how did those engagements conclude? More silence. Inconclusively, Karn said from his position as observer. Because our forces couldn't adapt when opponents refused to engage according to predicted models. Maya nodded. Earth never had the luxury of predictable conflicts. We spent millennia fighting ourselves, thousands of different combat systems, all evolving simultaneously, all trying to counter each other. We got very, very good at assuming the enemy had learned our last trick and prepared something new. She gestured at the broken chair leg, which Karn had brought as evidence. You see this as a symbol of improper equipment use. I see it as proof that equipment is temporary, but adaptation is permanent. Your doctrine assumes optimal conditions. Ours assumes nothing is optimal and plans accordingly. That's exhausting, Delver observed. It's survivable. It's also effective. And right now, those might be the same thing. Admiral Cass studied Maya for a long moment. You're arguing that we should incorporate human chaos theory into our established combat doctrine. I'm arguing that you should acknowledge that established doesn't mean complete. Your doctrine is excellent for fighting opponents who share your assumptions. Mine is designed for opponents who don't. Maya's voice softened. You invited humans into this academy to learn from you. Maybe it's time to consider that we might have something to teach as well. The review board deliberated for 6 hours. When they emerged, Admiral Kess addressed Maya in the empty council chamber. "Your course will continue," she said. "Expanded, actually. Non-standard engagement protocols will become mandatory for all senior tactical students, with Battlemaster Korin continuing as co-instructor." Maya felt tension drain from shoulders she hadn't realized were rigid. "Thank you, Admiral." "Don't thank me yet. You'll also be developing curriculum for academy-wide implementation teaching, instructors to incorporate adaptive methodology into standard doctrine." The Admiral's scales rippled in what might have been amusement. "Congratulations, Lieutenant. You've just revolutionized 800 years of galactic combat theory using nothing but a broken chair and aggressive pessimism." "Admiral, that too." 3 months later, Maya stood in the same training hall where she'd first faced Korin. But this time, she wasn't alone. 20 instructors from 14 species filled the space, here to learn how to teach what couldn't be properly systematized. "Welcome," she began, "to what might be the strangest course you'll ever take. I'm going to teach you how to teach people to trust their training while simultaneously planning for its complete failure." A Corval instructor raised an appendage. "That's contradictory." "It's human." "Same thing, really." Maya picked up a training staff intact this time. "Here's the essential principle. Everything you know is useful until it isn't. Equipment will fail. Plans will collapse. Opponents will do things that make no tactical sense. Your job isn't to prevent chaos, it's to function within it." She hefted the staff, testing its weight. "Battlemaster Korin, would you assist?" Korin stepped into the sparring circle. They'd choreographed this demonstration carefully, though Maya suspected he'd improvise. He was learning. They engaged a standard exchange following recognized patterns. Then, at a predetermined moment, Maya deliberately struck the staff against the floor at its stress point. It snapped. She didn't miss a beat, immediately transitioning to the improvised dual-weapon configuration that had become her signature. "Notice," she said, still moving through defensive patterns, "that the break didn't stop the engagement. It changed it. Korin now has reach advantage, but I have 2 striking surfaces and unpredictable angles. Neither position is better, they're just different. The question becomes, who adapts faster?" Korin pressed an attack. Maya countered with the jagged edge, forcing him to respect its cutting potential. They moved through several exchanges before Maya called halt. "That's the core concept," she said, slightly breathless. "Not fighting better. Fighting differently when circumstances require it. Your established doctrine isn't wrong. It's incomplete. And the part it's missing is what happens when everything goes wrong simultaneously." Over the following months, something changed in the Galactic Combat Academy. The change was subtle at first, students hesitating before fully committing to textbook responses. Instructors incorporating what-if scenarios into training exercises. Equipment failures being treated as learning opportunities rather than session cancellations. Vren, the Hethan student who'd improvised with a floor tile, graduated top of her class. Her thesis? Adaptive response theory in post-doctrine combat scenarios. It became required reading. The frontier conflicts resumed briefly that year. But this time, galactic forces engaged differently. When opponents refused to follow predicted patterns, units adapted instead of requesting doctrinal guidance. Improvised tactics. Unconventional solutions. They didn't always win, but they stopped losing predictably. Maya received a commendation from Galactic Command not for combat excellence, but for fundamental innovation in tactical education. She kept it next to the broken chair leg in her quarters. Korin found her there one evening, reviewing training reports. "Thought you should know," he said. "Command is sending observers to Earth. They want to study your species' combat development more comprehensively. They're going to be disappointed." We don't have a unified system to teach. That's precisely what they want to understand. His mandibles clicked thoughtfully. You've given the galaxy a gift it didn't know it needed, Torres. You've reminded us that survival requires more than perfection. It requires persistence. Maya smiled, turning the broken composite over in her hands. We just taught you what Earth learned the hard way. The universe doesn't care about your training, your plans, or your preferred outcomes. But if you're stubborn enough, adaptable enough, and willing enough to fight with whatever's handy, you get to choose whether you're defeated or just inconvenienced. Is there a difference? Only if you keep fighting. Corin was quiet for a moment. Then, your species terrifies me, Lieutenant. Yeah, Maya agreed. We get that a lot. But I'm grateful you're on our side. She looked at the broken chair leg, remembering the moment it had snapped, the moment everyone thought she'd lost. The thing about humans, Battlemaster, is that we don't really do sides. We do survival. And we've gotten very, very good at making sure anyone who fights alongside us survives. 2. By teaching them to fight wrong. By teaching them that wrong is just different, wearing uncomfortable clothes. She set down the composite. Besides, you call it chaos. We call it Tuesday. That still doesn't translate. Most human things don't. Maya turned back to her reports, smiling. But you're learning. That's the important part. Outside the training hall, a new generation of tactical students practiced with equipment that might fail, against opponents who might improvise, in scenarios that definitely wouldn't follow the manual, and somewhere in the galaxy's vast institutional memory, 800 years of refined doctrine quietly made room for a small addendum. When circumstances deviate from expected parameters, consult human adaptive methodology. Warning: may involve broken furniture, aggressive pessimism, and a complete abandonment of everything you thought you knew about combat. Results may vary. Effectiveness guaranteed. The broken chair leg sat on Maya's equipment rack, a monument to the day humanity taught the galaxy its most important lesson. Perfect technique loses to perfect adaptation every single time. And sometimes, being human just means being too stubborn to know when you're supposed to quit.